Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus said, I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, to receive as much again. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. The Gospel of the Lord.
Lord, praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. On Wednesday, April 3rd, 1968, a young preacher turned protester gave a speech. He had gathered at a church with a bunch of his friends, and after a long season of protests, he gathered to offer them some words of comfort. He had been jailed 5 times. He had been stabbed, his house had been bombed twice, he had been shot at. And yet, he persisted in the understanding that God was somehow in the midst of all of this violence and rancor. He got up that evening and he gave a speech reminding people that there was still a dream, that God was still in heaven, and that there was a promised land ahead. That night he wrote these words: like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I am not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And God has allowed me to go up to the mountaintop. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that as a people we will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm fearing no man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I have a dream this afternoon that the brotherhood of man will become a reality. With this faith, we will be able to achieve this new day when all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing the spiritual of old. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. At 5 minutes after 6 that next evening on April 4th, 1968, Dr. King was shot dead in Memphis, Tennessee. The dreamer, the one who had pricked the nation's conscience, who called to their better selves, is dead. But the dream, his vision from that mountaintop, was still very much alive. He called the night before for us to go to the top of the mountain so that we could see clearly where God was calling a nation. During a time of division and discord, he called to our better selves. He recognized that in the oppressor and the oppressed, both are damaged. He reminded us that light is the only thing that can dispel darkness. that love is the only thing that can overcome hate. And I have to say to you that that's a very hard thing to try to accomplish. Jesus in our gospel for this morning is speaking to his disciples, and they ask him, well, Jesus, how do we live like God's kingdom is here with us? And Jesus said, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, love your enemies. There are times I wish he had said, can you just tolerate your enemies? Can you kind of sort of like them? Because this loving your enemies thing is hard. When someone strikes you against the cheek, the last thing that comes to your mind is, I love you. Our instinct is always to hit back. But Dr. King reminded us that if we live by an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we're going to end up with a society of blind and dumb people. He is right. It takes so much energy to hate someone. It takes so much energy to stay in that place of light. But in Jesus and in Martin, we are reminded that God's light calls us always to a place of justice, to a place of liberation and freedom, to a place where we recognize that both our enemies and our friends, we are all damaged in our division, that no one comes out unscathed. We see this playing out in our world today. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were apt in 1968 as they are apt today. We may no longer have legal separate segregation, but we still live in a place where the rich and the poor never cross paths. Racism did not die with the passing of the Voting Rights Act. It lives on today, sometimes at the highest levels of leadership. And we, the inheritors of that dream, are called to make the dream real and present, here and now. Shakespeare reminded us that a rose by any other name is still a rose. That all the deep divisions in our society may go by a different name, but they still remain the same. And you and I, we are called to be interpreters and livers of that dream, to follow the way of Jesus that invites us to see our enemies not as people to be destroyed, but friends to be made. To look for that common ground where we are just one humanity looking for God's love. I look around and I see in Washington the craziness of 29 days of a government shutdown. Can we say division? But I also recognize that in the midst of all of our division and dividedness, at the core of who we are, as Dr. King recognized, is a yearning for compassion, for connection, for being together. This past Monday, I got on a plane to go to California. I came back to this, but we'll talk about that. When I was going through the security line, there were people ahead of me who had brought homemade muffins. One guy had bought 2 boxes of pizza to give to the TSA agents who were being unpaid throughout this whole time. I was thinking about that. TSA are not necessarily the people that you feel really giving towards, especially when they have to pat you down. But they felt compelled to do something for their fellow human beings who are going through a difficult time. And if you go online or turn on the news, there's so many stories of people helping those who are affected by our government shutdown to walk that journey with them. One of the ones that I love is that the air traffic controllers from Canada sent pizza to all the air traffic controllers here in the United States to say, we're with you. You see, at the core of our being is compassion. Compassion is being able to walk with each other in the good times and the bad times, and I think that that was the core of King's message. That our lives begin with compassion. That our lives begin when we recognize the humanity, the humanness, the God present in each other, and honor that presence. He called to our better selves, and in following Jesus, we are called to live that dream. Because you see, it is easy to honor the hero. It is easy to build monuments to him and to celebrate his day. It is harder to make his dream a reality. We can feel good about the monuments and the commemorations and all the wonderful things that will happen tomorrow, but on Tuesday, racism will still be alive. Oppression will still be present. Segregation will still be a part of the history of this nation. But you and I, the followers of the dream, God's dream of a world united, we are called to be the light that shatters the darkness. We are called to be the love that drives out the ugly head of hate. Because in living the dream, you and I are living out our call to be people of compassion, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so I leave you with the words of Charles Wendell Hines Jr. He wrote this about Dr. King. Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him. Build monuments to his glory, sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images we have fashioned for their lives. And besides, it is easier to build monuments than it is to make a better world. So now that he is safely dead, we, with eased consciences, will teach our children that he was a great man, and he was, knowing that the cause for which he died is still a dream, a dead man's dream. So my sisters and brothers, my invitation for you this week, and for the rest of our lives as we follow Christ, is to be dreamers. To live as if God's world is already here now. To love like Jesus, protest like Martin, and see God in the other. So that together we can join hands and, as he reminded us, say in the spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.